As someone who passed through the whole process of opening a tech startup in Italy, I honestly do not recommend to opening a company in Italy, especially if you have the possibility to open it in a more business-friendly country, except maybe for one specific type of business that I will explain later in the video, and that indeed accounts for 47% of the new companies that have been opened in 2024 in Italy. So while for sure the huge taxes that we pay in Italy are one of the main reasons, it can be actually comparable to many other countries in Europe where it's much easier to start and run a business. So what it actually makes it so much worse is the regulations, the bureaucracy in all the steps in running your business, and that it makes also so much difficult to attract investments. Indeed, according to the Global Business Complexity Index, Italy is at the third place as the most complex country where to run your business, and this is mainly due to the bureaucracy, the regulations that make it so difficult to attract investments, especially from other countries. This can also be seen by the numbers of big companies that in the last decades relocated from Italy to the Netherlands, not much for the tax brackets that are pretty comparable to Italy, but more for the regulations and how they protect certain type of investors. So it was a choice dictated more by the business environment than the pure monetary gain of moving that cartels in another country. And then if we look at the business environment for small companies in Italy, we can see that the government itself doesn't really do much to promote and help these companies to grow. Indeed, if we look at the data of last year, my notes, basically, we can see that last year 336,000 companies closed, of which 94% of those were micro enterprises, basically companies which profile is a company with less than 10 employees and less than 2 million in revenues. The main industries were retail, construction, food and beverage, and hospitality. And all of these are industries that are famous for having much more upfront cost, more running cost, and a lot more regulations in Italy as well. And so we can see that small companies have a real hard time to run their business and grow it, especially with all this bureaucracy to handle in every step of the business process. Then in my experience, there is another issue, that is the mentality of many entrepreneurs in Italy, that they don't see much value in investing a lot themselves in their companies, in digitalization, and in improving their processes inside the company. This was particularly true because in my startup we were working on a management tool, so we talked with many entrepreneurs trying to understand their processes and trying to promote some digital transformation for their companies. And we saw that it was very difficult to make them understand the value of the digital transformation, and they prefer to keep running everything in WhatsApp messages, Excel with a lot of data entry, manual data entry, and this made it very difficult for them to track all the processes inside the companies, and there was a lot of waste, especially on time, for some people to maintain all this very complex system where they could use whatever solution available on the market, even for free, and improve a lot their processes. So I actually found a study done on medium-sized companies in Italy, and they discovered that only 5% of them are actually investing and uses new technologies to improve their processes, while the majority of them are barely using any service, and 39% are not doing basically anything to improve using the new technologies. So this for sure is slowing down a lot the growth of these companies, and as well making it so much difficult to compete with other companies in the world, because now with a global market that it is, you need to consider not only the companies next to you in your country, but you are in a much more global scale. So being able to use the new technologies to speed up everything is basically a survival necessity more than a good to have. So what I believe is that both at company and government level, they should try to improve the digital transformation, trying to make everything much easier in terms of processes and bureaucracy, to make it more easy not only to grow but also to be able to compete on this global market. Just to give a reference, when we created our company, it took almost, I don't know, probably 6 months to have the company up and running because we went through this process of being a tech startup. So they even asked us many more papers, and in Italy you need to do so many things. Just to mention a few of these procedures that we had to do was basically to make this legal email. It is basically an email account where they verify your identity, so you need to pass this process of identification, and the same was done for the digital signature, because even in that case for these papers, to make it even more easy, so imagine if you had to do everything by hand, we have to get this device to sign digitally the documents, and even for that, at the time I was already living in France, so I had to go back to Italy in a post office to get this device, to get verified, and finally I could use it to sign the documents. And as well, the craziest thing probably was that they gave us some paper that was for the anti-corruption, anti-mafia procedure. So basically this paper needed to be signed to basically self-declaring that you are not into these things. But as well, they asked us to our parents to sign this paper. So imagine being a grown adult and having to ask your parents permission to open a company because they need to sign this paper, otherwise the procedure probably gets blocked or delayed. So it was very weird and time consuming as well, because you need to send the document, wait for them to reply and sign it. So it takes so much longer, and probably that's what caused to take months to open a company. When, if I think about, I was looking information to open a company in Singapore, and I saw that basically in 1 week you could potentially open a company. So if you compare these things, you understand that they absolutely need to find a way to improve these processes, because they're kind of dumb and too crazy, in my opinion. Then another thing that is not common in other countries is that the fact that even if you have a very, very small business, still you need to have somebody helping you, because of this bureaucracy is too crazy. So you have to hire a commercialista. It's called in Italian. It's basically an accountant slash fiscal advisor, because the tax agency in Italy sometimes does these checks, and sometimes they ask you to pay things that you are not even supposed to pay. But in order to demonstrate that you don't need to pay, you have to have somebody expert on the subject to understand what they're really talking about. It happened to us, and if you don't have somebody that knows this stuff, you maybe end up paying tons of money and even get sanctions from the tax agency, even though you are not at fault. But the problem is that in Italy, basically for these things you are guilty until you manage to prove that you're innocent, that you don't need to pay all these things. There is actually a case of certain content creators, many YouTubers, that were making a lot of money, but the problem is that the bureaucracy is complex. There is no real definition of the content creator business, so they were declaring their income in a way, in particular as royalty income, while the tax agency after the check said, no, what you're doing is not related to royalties, but is related to marketing. So the issue is that the two ways of declaring the income have a very different tax brackets. So what the tax agency was saying is that they were evading taxes, even though if they declare all their income, but in a different way. So they ended up in troubles with the tax agency, and had to spend much more money, and basically after that they got a lot of checks and wasting so much time handling all this document, and consistently accused of doing basically frauds to the government. And many of these creators in the end just moved away. So basically they scared them off and went to Dubai. Now there is a recent case that moved to Monaco. So I think also this pressure from the tax agency that more than regulating the business environment is trying to see the evil in the entrepreneurs and trying to find a way to make money out of people that are succeeding in doing business is basically scaring off many companies, that when they're at the point of growth, when they start being in the problems with the tax agency due to them being successful in their business, they just leave Italy. And honestly, I don't understand what's the benefit for doing so, because yes, maybe you make some quick money now to regain some of this money, but in the long term you don't have companies that are growing, that are hiring people in Italy. It's gonna be a very big drawback for the business environment in Italy. So for instance, a more reasonable solution would have been to finally put some regulation, specific codes related to the content creation business. Now is many years that people are making money online doing so maybe they could just adapt and evolve to this new kind of business and avoid any misunderstanding or way of declaring business that is not good to you, because the problem is that when you even ask to the tax agency how you should declare your income, they don't know what to answer you, and maybe you ask many times, you get many different responses. So what you need to do is basically declare in a way and hope they don't start chasing you just to make some quick money out of you. I actually have some horror stories that have been told by my friends that work in the food and beverage business, because there the regulations are even crazier. Like if I do digital services, you have certain problems, but there, every step of the food production process have some crazy rules. To give an example, one crazy rule for me is that at any given time, all the food that you're using and processing needs to be labeled. So to give you an example, if you are making a strawberry cake, so you have the strawberries, you start to chopping them to make the dessert, and maybe you have some leftover from the box that you opened and you put it in the fridge because maybe you want to make another cake later. But if they come to check on your business in that specific time and they open your fridge and they see that you have a box with strawberries in the fridge, it doesn't matter if you're going to use them in 5 minutes from now. They will give you a sanction and you really risk to close your business because they found a container with some food that doesn't have a specific label saying these strawberries were open at this time and they are coming from this batch, from this place. So if you don't stop cooking in that moment and do all these labels, basically you are in trouble. If they come and check on you, you really risk a lot. This is just one of the many things that can happen when you're running a business in the food and beverage. One other story that they told me was basically this person having a craft beer business. It was a very small production. It has basically 3 employees, and at some point they come to check on his business. It was basically the end of the week and he already had a big batch of bottles ready to be shipped. But in the previous months there was a new regulation that was changing the format of the labels to include something related to the new recycling rules. So basically they needed to specify some code to where recycle the bottle. And since it didn't update yet this label, they were giving him a very tough sanction and they told him that they need to confiscate all the bottles. So this person basically was just saying, okay, you can do that, but on Monday I go to my commercialista and start the procedure to close the business, and those 3 people will lose their job because what's the point? Like he has to pay these huge taxes and he cannot sell the goods, so he doesn't have any more money to run the business. So sometimes these regulations are so strict for nothing. Basically, you just ruin the possibility of people growing their business. So luckily in the end they understood the thing and they let him keep the bottles, probably just had to update the label. But still, if you're running a business in Italy like that, you need to get ready to deal with all of this in a very business unfriendly environment. So especially if you're thinking to run a food and beverage business, maybe open that cozy cafe or restaurant in Italy, I want you to really make a business plan, understanding all this regulation and all the struggles you will have to go through to run this business, and not just idealize the idea of doing this type of business, especially in an industry that is very, very competitive and there are very low margins due to this. And now also with the increase in prices in the energies, the cost of also renting a place and the high cost of labor in Italy. But there is, as I said, a type of business that maybe it could be good to start in Italy. And I'm referring at freelancing, doing professional services. So basically if you are a web developer or a consultant of some sort, that you don't need to deal with all these regulations of owning a physical shop or a store. because there is a special regime aimed at people in this type of business that they can pay only a flat tax of 5% for the first 5 years and 15% after that, as long as you have certain constraints, like you need to reside in Italy, you need to own less than 85,000 euros per year. So basically it's the only very convenient fiscal regime in Italy if you're starting a business, but it's good only if you are starting now from scratch. It helps you to get started. But once you grow in your business and you go out of these limitations, it's gonna be very difficult to switch to the normal type of business outside of this flat tax and with a lot more of regulations to consider. But if you're interested to understand how it works, because maybe it's something that you want to try, make sure to subscribe, because I wanted to prepare a video to explain how it works more in details and how you can apply for it if you're just starting your business as freelancer in Italy. While if you want to start your own shop in Italy, you will understand that it's very hard, and probably it's better to talk with a commercialista guy that will help you to address how to handle it. There is actually a regime forfettario as well for solopreneurs that want to open a shop. The problem is that there are some fixed costs related to the social security, that if you're a freelancer, you will just pay in percentage of the income that you make, while if you have a store, you have to subscribe to certain type of social security that will ask you to pay a few thousand euros per year, even if you don't make any money. So make sure to have enough budget to start this kind of business. So now I think I already talked too much. There is probably a lot to talk about, and many experiences from my business that I may talk in another video. So if you have specific questions, make sure to leave a comment down below. And thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.